seeing that it's about 12:01. I think we could probably go ahead and get started if that's okay with everybody. If you are not a speaker, if you wouldn't mind just going ahead and putting yourself on mute just so that we could limit background noise, I think that would be pretty helpful. So I'll just get started by saying my name is Julia Rajeski. I am CRK's Communications Manager. Today, I'm really excited for this webinar. We're going to talk about good gardening practices and how to save water in your own garden and in your own yard and in your own little green activities in your home. We will have hopefully a lot of time for questions at the end, but if anything just pops into your brain while a speaker is talking, feel free to add that into the chat. Or if we do eventually get the Facebook Live working, you can also post it in the Facebook comments so we can get to it that way. Like I said, I think everybody should be on mute at a certain point. I'd be happy to unmute you if you'd rather ask your question that way towards the end. Yeah, so without further ado, I'd love to go ahead and introduce our speakers or let them introduce themselves. So I think to start, if all of our panelists wouldn't mind just saying their name, their position with CRK, how long they've been gardening, and their favorite thing that they have grown to date. So we can play a little game of tag. So I'm going to tag Mallory first.
Hey everybody, so my name is Mallory and I am the new Headwaters Outreach Manager up here in the Gainesville office. I've been gardening for, I want to say just a year at my house. And my favorite thing that I have grown to date was a watermelon. I got one last year and I was so proud. I'm going to go ahead and tag Ashley.
Hey everybody, my name is Ashley DeCincy and I am the Middle Chattahoochee Watershed Protection Specialist, and I've been gardening currently in our new home for about 2 years. And my favorite thing, it's really hard to choose, I have some pitcher plants that I've been growing, and this year one of them produced a beautiful flower, and so it's kind of like the highlight is not only getting them to live, but to actually see them producing flowers. So it's really exciting. And I'm going to tag Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol McIntosh. I'm CRK's Financial Manager. I've been gardening off and on for 20 years, depending on where I live, if I have the ability, and I've been assisting an urban farmer for 7. So favorite thing I've grown is I did not grow it from seed. I grew it from a seedling, is a pawpaw tree. And I'm looking forward to getting some more. Tammy?
I'm Tammy Bates. I'm the Outings Manager for Riverkeeper in the Atlanta office. And I think this is my 13th year with Riverkeeper. But I've mostly been gardening ever since I've had my first home long ago. Grew up gardening with my grandmother, so that became a passion, following in her footsteps. And I'd say probably my favorite plant is my Venus flytrap overwintered in my little baby bog garden. And along with pitcher plants, I was really surprised to see that come back and flowering.
Y'all are making me jealous with my little front stoop garden onions, but all of those plants sound awesome. And I guess we can go ahead and move on to the next question, which is pretty much the reason we're all here. What are some of the more surprising ways that you save water around your home, outside, for use in your garden? So we can play tag again because that seems to work. So Ashley.
Sure. So I liked the idea of surprising. So we actually have a rain garden that we've created in an area that stayed pretty inundated with water. So instead of just letting it kind of be this mucky, flooded area, we put in a rain garden with specific plants, which I can actually, let me pull it up really quickly. I'm going to share my screen and I'll show you really quick. Let's see. So the one on the left is a rain garden, and we put in a lot of plants that can handle a lot of moisture. Another way, we had an area that liked to not only kind of flood, but there was a lot of runoff and sediment problems going on there. So we put in a bog. We dug out a bog and put in a bunch of, again, plants that enjoy wet, marshy conditions. And yeah. And then the last thing that we've done is we had an area that liked to, again, create a lot of runoff and issues. So instead of just letting that runoff happen, we put in a nice pond to catch that water. So yeah. And I'm going to tag Mallory.
Yeah, so, Ashley, those rain gardens in the bog is a dream of mine. I currently have a rain barrel that I use to capture my water, and thankfully I was able to attend a CRK rain barrel workshop last year where I got the rain barrel and finally got it connected over the winter time, but it has collected more water than I could have hoped for, which is great. But that's currently what I do, and I'm hoping to slowly but surely add to that, but the rain barrel has really helped me water my garden. Tammy, I'm going to go ahead and tag you.
Okay. And regarding collecting water, our house has a metal roof, and so gutters aren't really an option to have a rain barrel. So we had to kind of get creative, and during a heavy rain, we've lived in our house for 5 years. During a heavy rain, we identified where the heaviest runoff was. And so I'll share our screen with you. Let's see. So we installed 3 of these livestock tanks. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, so we cleaned them out yesterday, and we got 1.5 inches of water last night. And so this is an example of how we are collecting water. We have 3 of these, like I said. And then we also have a little, there it is. So a little shed with a porch, and so we actually put out buckets under until we can get some gutters installed there, and it actually filled, those. So we water out of those as much as we can. Let's see. And so one of the things to note with collecting water is mosquitoes, or how long the water sits. So I just wanted to bring up that this water becomes non-potable at some point. Could be very dangerous to pets. So we frequently clean them out. We'll drain the bins and water some other plants with it and keep them fresh and clean. So that's kind of how we're handling it at our home. So I'll tag Carol.
I have just got a rain barrel, so that will be a new way for me to catch the water. One of the interesting ways I've found to catch some water is I live in a house that runs an air conditioner, and I noticed that there was a pipe coming out that the water was just going down the side of the house, the side yard. So I decided that I would try to catch that water. And the way that I did that was that I took the little tube that comes out of the sump pump of the air conditioner, and I coiled it into a 5-gallon bucket, and it just collects in there, and I take it from there and put it into other containers. Let me see. Like Tammy said, you don't want to encourage the growth of mosquitoes or encourage animals coming through and drinking it. So I put it in containers that have a lid, and then I use that to go around the house and water my potted plants, because I don't have a yard that really is conducive to growing in the ground. So let's see. In the house, I have a very simplistic method for collecting some water that I thought was just unnecessarily going down the drain. Before I take a shower, I'm really not a cold shower person, so I like the water to be warm. But that water running out before it gets warm, I just thought, well, that's, I hate wasting that. So I get a pitcher, and I put it underneath the spout, and I collect the water that comes out while you're waiting for that water to get warm. And I take that, and then it comes down in my kitchen. I have some containers that were juice containers, and I hate that they're plastic, but that's the way some things are. But this, you know, I don't have to worry about this not going to recycling because I'm reusing it. So I feel better about that. And I use that water to water the plants inside my house. So that's what I got.
Before we move on, I would love to show a photo of my rain barrel. I didn't even think about it, but I want to go ahead and share my screen. Carol, I have got to get some pictures because that is a great idea. But this is, and I'm hoping, can everybody see that all right? Excellent. So this is the barrel that I did get from the CRK workshop. And like Tammy and Carol mentioned about the algae growth, this barrel was that frosty, milky color beforehand, but it was highly recommended to paint it. So that's why I did paint it with that gray color to hopefully prevent some of that sunlight coming in, producing a lot of algae. I did take that hose off that you can kind of see that's connecting the barrel to the gutter. And peeked inside of it the other day, and I do have a little bit of algae, so that's something to kind of keep in mind when my dog gets around it, or even my little chickens that I have. But that is just something to kind of keep in mind as well. But it collects a lot. I don't even know what the volume is for this rain barrel, but it's definitely enough to garden and water my garden for multiple days.
And that brings up a great point, Mallory. Is one of the other questions I had was, you know, these kind of alternative methods to watering your garden, do they have any effect on what you're planting, the plants, or is the bulk of the difference really just in how you're watering? So if anybody wants to weigh in about the effect of these different methods on your plants.
Sure, I'll go first. So for me, I am a botanist, and so I do focus primarily on using native plants. I do have a small vegetable garden with, you know, some simple things, tomatoes and peppers and other things, but for the most part, we are working to create a space, here I'll share my screen, that is native. And so the fruits that we have blueberries that are native fruit producing species. We have pawpaw, which I know Carol loves. We do have two that are a little younger, so they haven't produced any fruit yet, but this year was a good year for blooms. So we're hopeful. We do have muscadines, native blackberries, Chickasaw plums, things like that we are growing. And we have, you know, taken our backyard that was dominated by Georgia grass, and we're those crazy people digging it up and putting it on the road for everybody else comes by and grabs it. But we've basically taken our space and created all these different beds and areas for native plants. And I say that to say using natives requires less water overall, because these plants are designed to be in this environment. They're good with the ebb and flow of these weather patterns that we have. And so once you get them established, they don't typically need to be watered. If it's a really hot, dry day and you feel bad for them and they're looking a little bit, you know, sad, you can give them some water. But for the most part, we don't have to water once we've got them in the ground. So, yeah. Yeah, and I'll tag Tammy if she wants to go ahead and answer.
For us, we are growing a lot of what you mentioned, but we do a lot of vegetable gardening. Where we live west of Atlanta, the dirt is very sandy and quartz-like, so it does not retain water. So we did have to create some raised beds and add some amendments so that we don't have to water as frequently. So, you know, I know everybody has different challenges based on where they are in Georgia, from red clay to sand. So you have to kind of adapt as you can with the growing. So I'll tag Mallory.
And I also have a lot of raised garden beds because I do primarily do vegetables and I try my best at them, but I do like to call myself an experimental gardener where I just throw stuff in the ground and I hope for the best and water it along the way. But I really started that rain barrel because I was reading how much, of those chemicals and minerals that can be found in tap water, where rainwater is just generally healthier for the plants that you're trying to grow. So that's primarily why I started with that rain barrel collection method. And I did around my raised garden. I don't know if anybody else has heard this. This is one of my experiments, but trying to keep the soil just as moist as possible to just capture that so it's not evaporating in the nice Georgia heat. But I took cardboard and trying to kill some of that grass that was around it. I laid cardboard down. I know it's going to decompose, so I feel better using that than, plastic or a tarp. And then I took pine straw and simply just sprinkled it all around my raised garden. I tried to put some mulch on top of where the plants are planted. And I'm really hoping we're going to see how well that holds that moisture in the ground. So I'm just simply hoping that those plants will have more time to continually collect the water from the roots and everything. And then Carol, you want to add anything?
Let's see. If I had my own place, one of the ways I would garden that would save water would be to use the permaculture method. And it's really labor intensive, but I've seen it when I worked at a garden center years ago. I saw someone do a demo permaculture garden, and it was amazing how many different plants, fruits, vegetables, natives. We put what we called our rescue plants in there, plants that were dying or gotten from somebody else's house that didn't want them, and put them in there, and they just thrived. And we never watered it at all. So it kind of combines a lot of what everybody else said. And then what I've observed at the farm that I work at is it's on a hill. So it's kind of a tiered system, so that we do use some irrigation there, but we also have that tiered into the hill. So it kind of just washes down a little bit, and we don't have to water as much.
So my next question kind of ties into that too. For somebody who's just getting into gardening, some of these ideas may seem a little, different than what they're already doing. So what is the, level of maintenance on some of these? How much work is it to install a rain barrel versus to install a raised bed? And how much, I guess, effort do y'all put into that on a normal basis? And I'll tag Tammy.
I can say ideally I would have preferred not to have had raised beds, but because of our soil structure, we really didn't have a choice for growing. So, container gardens are great. Raised beds, like I said, we had to add amendments that would hold the moisture, but it's, preferable not to have to do that. It is rather expensive for a raised bed, the materials, plus the additional dirt that you have to buy. So, again, you have to kind of adapt and be flexible where you're growing. So I'll tag Ashley.
Okay, so I will say that a lot of the projects that we've done, around the yard have been pretty labor intensive. The rain garden was pretty simple. We just removed some of the grass that was in the area and then, brought in some of the natives. And, we go out and we find rocks and driftwood, and, we will spend our weekends out on the dirt roads looking for rocks and things like that to add in the yard. I know my kids, sometimes they enjoy it. But so that one was pretty simple. The beds that are in the ground, we had to dig up so much grass, and a 10 by 10 bed will take all day if you're removing grass. So it's really a big process. But it's interesting, if you look at that grass, the root structure of most of these non-native grasses, they're very shallow. They don't do much for erosion, things like that. So yeah, removing it is a good thing. The pond, we're on like our 6th iteration. It's been a process to get it where it is today, but now it is almost completely natural. We've got a very, very heavy percentage of clay in our area, so it was super easy to just kind of pack it down, and now it holds water no problem, and the rains replenish it just fine. And then let's see, for the bog, we did that in a weekend. We dug it out, we bought sand, we have a really nice compost, which, let's see really quickly. So we just put in a very simple compost. We got some pallets, threw them in a square, got some tin to kind of hold it together, and we compost our veggie scraps and some leaf litter and things like that. And you can see our nice worms that we've gotten. But we just did a mixture of sand, compost, and vermiculite with a liner underneath, and it holds water really, really well. So for beginner gardeners, some of the things we've done may be a bit much. But again, if you contact, native nurseries, talk to them about the plants in the area that you have. You can do a very simple soil test at home, where you, if you have some sort of auger or something, if you can get a soil sample, put it in a jar, shake it up, and let it settle out, you can actually look at, your grit and things will settle first, and then your sand, and then your clay, and silt, and then your clay. And you can actually measure using a ruler the amount of each and divide out and get your percentage of your soil type. So I would recommend, do some soil sampling, look at your light levels. Like Carol was saying, the farm where she works, they've got a hillside, which is really nice. Look at the topography of your land and talk to a nursery and see, what plants are going to work best for you. Sorry, long-winded. I'm going to tag Mallory.
See, and that is something I have not done. I have not tested my soil, and I think that's going to be a next step that I need to work on. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well, because I've only been gardening for a year, so I do still consider myself a beginner. All right. It's loading to be a little bit bigger, but I am all about those reusable materials and recycled materials. So as you can see, I did make a fence out of pallets. The picture's a little blurry, but this is where a lot of my friends and neighbors, shout out to everybody who has helped, because I don't have a truck, and I had a friend who went out and helped me gather these pallets that were essentially free. And it did take a little bit of manpower. We put T-posts in the ground, put the pallets right on top, but that created a nice little barrier for hopefully the bigger critters to not get in the garden, because I do live next to a nature preserve, and deer do like to roam the neighborhood. There is also a school in my neighborhood, and they were doing construction one day and getting rid of tons of stuff, and that is how I scored all the cinder blocks for free. And I am doing that raised garden bed, so I just made some basic squares, and this design has changed over the past year and a half. But I went really simple this year, just to do squares. Found some of those metal tins that somebody was selling for next to nothing. Did get some dirt from a Habitat for Humanity store. They sell bags that have been ripped, from Ace Tractor Supply, for almost $1 or $2 each. So thankfully it is expensive. it's a great hobby though, but if you're able to find some of those stores that sell discounted items and just kind of keep your eyes peeled, you'll definitely score some great discounts. But was able to fill up most of that cinder block raised bed. And then here's a picture of my most recent, took this not yesterday, but the day before. Definitely have some things that are sprouting, but as you can see, I have sticks that I made for trellises. There's an old pallet panel on that middle raised bed held up with some, I don't even know what they're called, but they're just metal posts. And there's all that pine straw that's laying on top of the cardboard. It does take time, but I try to do maybe 15 to 30 minutes of maintenance every day where I go in, try to get the weeds I can. I try not to stress too much about it because it could be stressful if you let it. But once you get a foundation, I feel like you don't have to spend much time on it. And I even had a neighbor who made raised beds out of old dresser drawers, where she just laid those right on the ground, put some dirt in it, and she had beautiful plants. So you don't have to get too crazy. And they were much smaller than what I went with for this year. But anything that kind of has that boundary and that, I don't know, stable wall, you can make a raised bed out of it. But that's where hopefully the thrift stores, once everything opens back up, maybe some people will get some ideas to go out and grab a few items. But yeah, not too long, but a little bit to get it all situated. Carol?
I love all of this. This is great. I don't have that much to add because I don't really have a garden at home. It's not, the yard's not conducive to it. But I agree with Mallory and Tammy and Ashley. It's a labor of love. You really, if you want to do it, you'll do it, and you won't even notice the time pass, because in the end, you're gonna be enjoying everything you've done. And for me, it helps me settle my mind and de-stress and relax, to just get out there, hear the birds, get my hands in the dirt and see what I can create. It gives you an outlet for creativity. It's time consuming, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that getting out in your garden is it's good for the soul. Absolutely. What made y'all want to, be conscious of how much water you're using? Mallory, using recycled materials like that is such a good idea. Why are y'all so intentional in your gardening, and why do you think other people should be? So I'll tag Ashley.
Yeah, so I mean, really, there are a couple reasons, that I think are really important. I think that everybody should be conscious of the water that we're using, not only outside but also inside, which I think Carol's way of saving the water from the shower is absolutely amazing. I hadn't thought of that. I think we're gonna steal that one from you as well. I think that's a great idea. So we've always tried to just kind of be aware, and knowing that there's a limited amount of fresh water that we all have available, not just us but everyone, around the globe. Really, it's really something that has stuck with me through undergrad and graduate school, and thinking about things like that. So it's just something that I've always been conscious about. And then, looking at, I'll share my screen, I think, one more time, saving the water and creating these different installations and things that, use less water or create, habitats. These are just some of the animals that, we find in our backyard, on the regular. We've had a box turtle come visit. We've got decays, brown snakes, garter snakes, frogs, toads. Our pond is full of tadpoles right now. dragonflies, the birds that come and utilize our, you know, rain garden and things like that. For me, it's not just about us, it's about, you know, all of the animals and everything. So yeah, kind of sappy, like save them all. But yeah, I'll tag Tammy.
Going back to mentioning our metal roof, it creates quite a drip line all around the house. So we actually try to target plants close to there so they automatically get some water or condensation off the roof. So yeah, it's just being conscious of being able to save as much as you can and reuse, because the plants obviously love rainwater better than, you know, your hose water. Something we've noticed in our place when we bought it, they used a lot of home pesticides. And so obviously when we moved in, we didn't use those any longer. So one of the surprisingly great things to see is the abundance of lizards, anoles, skinks are just everywhere now. And of course they take care of the bugs. We bought some praying mantis egg cases. And so those guys are, you know, helping us. So it's all the predator bugs that have returned and helping us. So it's kind of, you know, it's all tied to water, but it's all tied to just the environment and making sure it's a healthy environment. So I'll tag Mallory.
I cannot say it better than what you all just said. I mean, water is such a precious resource that, I mean, every living thing depends on. So knowing that I can do my little part in trying to, you know, lessen my footprint a little bit, just gives me a great sense of pride. And, you know I'm doing something for the natural world. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have for that water saving. Carol?
I just have to say ditto what all of you said.
Again, y'all are just making me want to run outside right now and start tearing up my yard and making some gardens. But, you know, I think that's a great question to kind of end this part of the presentation on. I don't know if anybody here on Zoom has any questions you'd like to ask. If so, you know, feel free to unmute yourself. I think we've got enough people to where you can do it that way. Anybody? Jerry, Sherry, Christy, Bob, anyone? Okay. Oh, Jerry.
I'm in a.
Hi. Oh.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Hello. Yeah. I'm kind of, my Zoom is kind of in and out, so I might have missed something, but I love all this information. Thank you so much. I have, my vegetable garden is encroached by my canopy. I live kind of where I have a small backyard, but so I've tried to plant things that I just keep moving my garden out, you know, every year. And the canopy of trees just kind of takes over. So I've noticed everybody's in sun. And I'm just wondering what a good shade garden would look like, you know, and how to approach that, because it's a little frustrating. I've got my herbs that grow well there, and I have some summer lettuce, but I'll take any suggestions to handling that. I'm actually moving my tomato plants and some other things to my patio where there is sun. But I'm open to any suggestions you might have. Thank you.
Just a general rule of thumb for your vegetables or herbs or anything like that is at least 6 hours of sun a day. So if you could search that out to see when it can get that. Shade gardens though, I mean, I have a lot of shady areas in my place, and I put, you know, ferns or things that like the shade. You know, there's some native sweet shrubs that love the shade. There's quite a bit. But yeah, for the growing vegetables, you need at least 6 hours.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just had a quick question about the rain barrel. I noticed in the picture there was a tube going into the side of the downspout. How do you keep most of the water going into the barrel rather than going past the hole that's in the downspout.
So as far as the rain barrel, are you talking about the connecting piece to the gutter?
To the gutter, yeah, to the downspout, right.
Yes. So thankfully, when I did that workshop, which, I mean, you can get these installation kits for the rain barrel, I believe on Amazon. I'm not, oh, Julia.
I was just going to add, we actually sell them at CRK. We're not delivering right now because of social distancing, but we sell them for just $35, and obviously all the proceeds go towards a pretty good cause. So yes, Amazon, that's okay, but you can also buy from us too.
Yeah, I'd much rather buy them from CRK. So.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah. If you look, I was actually wondering that myself, Jerry, when I got mine, and you pull it out of the package, the kit out of the package, and there's a piece that goes in that is kind of flat, and I wish it was closer to me. It's downstairs, but you can see where it has little drains, holes where it'll drain into that tube. It'll catch it coming down, and it lets some go by, but it catches about half and half, I think.
So there's something that protrudes into the downspout. And
Yes, you fold it up and put it into that hole, and then it opens up. It's like kind of a silicone
Nice.
piece.
All right.
Yeah, and the one I got from CRK was, I mean, it has like a little trench that the water collects. Yes, and it goes into that hose, but then there's a huge hole right in the middle of the part that you insert into the gutter, and that's where a lot of the water goes straight through. So you still have water coming through that gutter, just like normal. It's just helping capture a lot of it too, to hopefully, like in my case, definitely helping with some erosion issues. But yeah. It's a very easy kit.
Yeah, and it's an overflow to keep it from overflowing. And there's actually, I don't know if yours has it, Mallory, but at the top of the barrel, you know, there's should be another hose coming out to, you know, offset the flow so it doesn't all back up right there, because the barrel fills really quick. So that excess water has to go somewhere.
Right. Well, thank you all for the tips. Let me know as soon as I can get one from CRK. I mean, I'm willing to drive by and just pick it up on the.
Well, that'd be great, Jerry. I'll get you in touch. I think since you registered on Zoom, I have your email. I'll get you in touch with Jordan, who manages our rain barrels, and because I know you just said you picked yours up. He might be doing a few here and there, so I'd love to get you in touch with him.
That'd be great.
This. Cool.
Yeah, I'm with the My Environment team with Bank of America, so I could spread the word too.
That'd be great. Yes, please. And that was a great question too. I know my house doesn't have gutters, so I want a rain barrel, but the kind of technical side of it makes me a little nervous. So that was super helpful. But
and Jerry, if you have a team, I mean, sometimes we do rain barrel workshops for groups of people, so that might be an option that Jordan can talk to you about.
We're usually looking for a volunteer, so we could double up maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Does anybody else have any questions? I have one if no one else has one right now. What native plants would be the easiest to kind of plant for somebody who, like me, who's relatively new to gardening? And why are these plants better? You know, I know I'm for native plants, but I'm not 100% sure why. So maybe someone can lead some, give us some insight on that.
Yeah, so I'll snag that question. Yeah, so knowing what plants are easiest, again, really depends on, knowing your landscape. Light, how much light does the area get? So spending a little time watching, from sun up to sundown, how much light does that area get? Knowing your soil composition, I cannot stress enough, is very important, because of course, even native plants, most of them do pretty well. They're kind of cosmopolitan throughout the different soil types, but there are some that want specific, types of soil. If it's a plant that grows in a floodplain where you'd call it a mixed mesic forest, where sometimes, you know, that ground is saturated, but it's always really moist, then you probably don't want to put something there that's in the sandhills, you know, of Georgia, where it's sandy and dry 80% of the time. So what I recommend is, number one, you can go online and just Google native plant nurseries. There are so many different listings. The Georgia Botanical Society does. They have listings of native plants, nurseries, but find one and call them or go visit. I drive, because in Columbus we don't have a native nursery. I drive an hour and a half to visit my friends at Nearly Native Nursery in Fayetteville. They are incredibly knowledgeable. Jim and Debbie, you can go out, any plant that's growing on their property, he knows probably thousands of different species that they have. He can tell you sunlight, he can tell you, you know, soil requirements. Their website also has a really, really great, if you click on a plant, most of them have pictures, and it tells you sun, soil, and moisture requirements, along with, you know, how big do they get, yada yada. So for a beginner, I would start, you know, looking for a nursery and talking to them, and why we should plant them. They have a multitude of benefits. Our pollinators that are here, you know, they recognize these native plants. The different species of bees, wasps. By the way, carpenter bees do pollinate. For those of you out there who don't think they do, I had this conversation with my mother-in-law recently. I promise you they're pollinators. Give them a big dead log and they won't burrow in your house, and they are pollinators. So are wasps. But pollinators, they know the plants that they've evolved with. If you plant exotics and invasives, you know, sometimes they don't pollinate, and a lot of cultivars like roses and things like that, they actually have less nectar. So these pollinators are spending more time trying to pollinate and get that nectar from plants that don't have as much. So they're meant to be here. They're great for the pollinators. They provide habitat for a plethora of different species, and you can't go wrong, and you can't kill them. Yeah.
I'm sold 100%. I'm gonna go out and buy some. And also, my mind is blown at the carpenter bee thing. I didn't even I mean, I knew they're bees, but that's changed my outlook on them entirely.
My dogs are terrified of them now. They're
so big.
They're interesting, and they'll follow you around and get right here and just stare at you. Yeah, so if you've got a dead tree on your property like we do, we cut it down to about 8 feet tall, and we planted some native coral honeysuckle on it, and we've got carpenter bees that have been coming back to it for the past couple years, and they'll buzz around and act all crazy if you get near it, but you can see their little holes where they're burrowing. And yeah, and they come to our plants and pollinate all the time. So I like them.
I wanted to add what Ashley said. Don't be intimidated by anything. Have fun with it. I mean, seeds are, you know, $2 to $3 a package for 50, or, you know, the plants are relatively inexpensive where you find them. So yeah, definitely have fun with this.
That's great advice. Yeah. I feel like I have a stack of packets of seeds that I'm like, oh, I don't know. That's a little, you know, like cucumbers. That seems challenging, but I don't know. I'm going to go for it, Tammy.
Oh, and be careful. So I know Cheerios, they were doing a free seed. Like if you bought Cheerios for a while, they were giving out free seeds, and it said, you know, plant these for your pollinators. If you look on the packet, most of those seeds were exotic species coming from China, Japan, places like that. And so if you buy these seed mixes from Walmart or Cheerios or, you know, any of these places, just check to see what's in there, because sometimes, you know, again, I'm not knocking cultivars as a whole. I'm focused on those plants that are invasive or have the potential to be invasive. So if you're unsure, check the package, go online, There are lists out there that tell you what is invasive and exotic in our state, you know, and just kind of educate yourself. And yeah, have fun with it, but just be conscious of what you're planting.
Some great advice. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask before we wrap up?
I just wanted to say one thing about native plants. I'm actually going to an event this weekend or Saturday sponsored by South Fork Conservancy where they're selling milkweed for like $5 a plant.
I saw that.
Yeah, I saw it on Facebook. So that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, and with your milkweed, I'm sorry, one more thing. If you get it from a nursery, make sure to ask them if it's pesticide free. It's the neonic pesticides that, you know, we've got some milkweed that already has monarch eggs and little monarch caterpillars. If these milkweed have been treated, they're laying their eggs there to die. So I went to a nursery in town. I asked one of the guys, I saw milkweed and I'm like, oh, that's good. And I asked the owner about it and he said he wasn't sure if they've treated. So I obviously didn't buy it. And avoid tropical milkweed. That's one that has become a really big issue. Swamp milkweed, your common milkweed, those are all great. But just avoid tropical and always ask if they're pesticide free.
Well, they said they were going to sell dryland and wetland versions. And I'm going to get some wetland versions because it's for a low area that I want to kind of keep the erosion controlled. But lowland or wet versions aren't tropical, right?
They're not. So your tropical milkweed is actually going to be labeled as tropical. Mallory, I think, was nodding. So your again, you can go. So there's an amazing app that I found. Not an app, it's online. It's namethatplant.net. And it is amazing. And you can go on there and just put in milkweed and it'll show you all of the different species. So the wetland milkweed, I have some of that, which is like your swamp and ever blooming. There's like 30 different species. And then you do have your dry upland species. If you're planting in a wet area, if you look for some native grasses as well, they'll help with erosion. Some of them have like a 6-foot long taproot, so they can be very beneficial in areas where you're having issues. I can't think of the mully grasses and stuff like that. Those are really good. But yeah, if it says tropical milkweed, don't buy it. It doesn't die back in the winter, and it carries a parasite, and it can cause all sorts of problems. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully I can cut down on that water flow with my new rain barrel. Thanks.
Awesome, guys. Well, hearing no more questions, I think we're good to go ahead and wrap it up. For everybody that did join us on Zoom, which is everyone because I couldn't get the Facebook Live going, we will be sending you an email later today with contact info for everyone that spoke today, more information about our rain barrels and some of our upcoming events. And because you registered, you're also going to receive a free membership to Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. That's kind of exciting. So be on the lookout for that. And we hope to see you on another webinar real soon. So thank you, everyone.